Today I will be interviewing Big Lou, a guy that grew up in Camden, New Jersey, has a lot of stories to tell us about what it was like when he was a kid there in the 1950s, dealing with World War II parents who were far more aggressive with their discipline, hanging out with a bunch of knuckleheads in the streets, and overall just the vibe of what it was like to grow up. All right, we're getting into another episode here, episode 4 of the MetaBullet podcast. Today, we are very fortunate to have a legacy individual, Big Lou. How are you, Big Lou?
I'm doing real good. Yourself?
I'm doing good. This is a pleasure for me to be able to interview you because you have a ton of knowledge and you have a lot to share and you have a lot of experiences. So with all that being said, if you could just introduce yourself. I know we're going to get into where you grew up, which is Camden, New Jersey, but if you could just tell me about yourself and maybe the origins of Big Lou.
Okay, growing up in Camden, was living in a row house in South Camden. Neighbors were very close, sitting on porches. Nobody was hiding in the house. Kids were playing over across the street in a lot, throwing the ball around, hoping to go play Little League in time.
You're telling me you grew up, you played some baseball. And
From Little League baseball.
Stickball or was it baseball?
It was Little League baseball up to, I guess it was 12 years old.
So some of the
out there from like 8 or 9.
Some of the old timers, the legacy, what people call the grandparents now, were there watching the young kids, or maybe they knew family and friends, and you got to interact with some of these old timers.
Well, the fortunate thing was we evolved around Sacred Heart Church in Camden on Broadway, and one of the boys that played, and he was a catcher, his father owned Stanley's Bar right down the street from the church. So all the guys who had nicknames like Rivets and Buckets and things like that, because their dads worked at the shipyard, and they carried them names. So we would all get the uniforms of Stanley's Bar and then walk all the way down to where the shipyard was, and across from there was the Little League Stadium. So we all got to go to school together, and we also played ball together. So
can you tell me when you were born in Camden, right?
I was born in Cooper Hospital in Camden. In
Camden, New Jersey. Okay. How was the city itself when you grew up? How were the streets and what did the buildings look like?
I was in the Italian section in South Camden. And the women come out and wash down the marble stoops.
Wow.
And they would sit out and talk to their neighbor. Everything was clean. Broadway had beautiful shops, pharmacies, everything. It just was movie theaters. Wow. We had all of that. And most of the adults worked at Camel Soup, RCA, Van Skyver's Furniture, or the shipyard.
Now, what I know from what I've learned about Camden is it used to be, it was a big deal. And the trains that would run through South Jersey would go to Camden because that was the place to go if you wanted to make money. That was the place to go if you wanted to be somebody, because then you could cross the water and you could go over to Philadelphia. So I don't think people realize, or I don't even know if they care, but Camden used to be a very important city in New Jersey. So you actually got to see some of it while it was still a gem.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, it became, it looks like a war went on there. I know it's better now, but I know in the 80s and the 90s and probably the 70s is when the dip really happened, when Camden went down. What you were there in the 60s? I was
there in the mid-50s.
Wow.
To 1962.
Wow. So the fall came not too long after 62.
Right. The reason why the main movement to move out was a town called Cherry Hill, which was equivalent in today's time of Washington Township.
Sure.
And also Woolwich. They had a lot of things going on. So the people felt that they wanted to get out of the city and have a house that had a driveway.
Sure.
And not a back area from the row houses where you just park where you could find a spot.
Now,
So that's what happened. They start leaving around 1960.
your family didn't leave because of crime, right? Did they leave for any other reason?
No,
They left.
they left for looking for their children to go to a school in the suburbs.
The suburbs.
And that's why we left.
Gotcha.
It wasn't that anybody was bothering the row houses, because each block was very protective of each other. So nobody outside, and it was very South Camden, Italians, Polish town, Jewish town, Irish sections. We were all segregated at that time.
So it was similar to that movie, the Gangs of New York at the time, except it was broken down into neighborhoods that were managed by different cultures. So you guys didn't cross paths, right? Like you didn't really hang out in like the Polish section, or did you guys ever cross?
As we were young guys, because I left around 13, we couldn't leave our neighborhood to go to other neighborhoods because it was real ethnic and you didn't belong in our neighborhood. So we basically stayed in South Camden, which was nice, and they had their nice stuff. So everybody seemed to gel pretty good on their own. And so we learned that communicating in row houses, you get to know the neighbors' kids, and that's who you're going to play with. And the funny thing is, started out in Camden when we were maybe 8. So young guys would say, why don't we make wooden sticks and use trash cans lids and be like swordsmen? So that's what we did in an empty lot. And you had to put your can up the lid or you're going to get hit with the stick. So that's what was happening. And then we learned where I talked to people growing up, and I said, what are we going to do today? They said, we're going to play step ball. And I'm like, what's that all about? He said, you're going to hit the step, and depends on how far the ball goes across the street, there'll be a home run. If it's shorter, it's a double. If it's too close to your side of the street, it's a single. Gotcha. So we learned that. And then I also learned wire ball. Wire ball consists of 3 or 4 wires above your head, and the higher one you hit with like a regular ball, tennis ball, you would get a home run. So that's how we gauge what we were doing. And the most interesting thing was a lot of the fathers came across the street from where I lived and threw the ball to their kids, hoping they can make the team. And then we also had the older fellows that would sit on the bleachers, which is only a practice field, and they would throw dice. They would play poker, and they would also drink what they classified as Dago Red.
Right.
And so they enjoyed themselves. They sit up there and we played. They never bothered us.
Right.
And it's just that element that you see people throwing dice on some cement was a whole other world to me, and everybody flipping money down and betting. That's what was going on. And the niceness was you became a little bit tougher when you were a kid, because if you hung on Broadway, it was beautiful there, but there's bigger guys and older guys that might push you around a little bit. So you have to be with your friends who are ready to get maybe punched in the face, but that's okay.
Or maybe punch somebody else in the face.
You're learning how to get stronger, and you're learning how to get disciplined and with respect. And that's what we were doing back then.
Well, the cool part about that, I grew up before the internet, so I can relate with just going outside and meeting the local kids, and nobody's handing you money. You're using your environment to create games, and sometimes some of the kids you interact with, some of their families might not be the greatest, so they're getting yelled at to go outside and go play. So it was a lot more rough back then, and not rough in like a bad way, but just you got more out of your actual environment and your community, right?
Exactly.
You learned through your environment.
Well, we always would see the guys on the benches. They had white shirts on and Lucky Strikes in their pocket.
Yeah.
So all of us, when we were like 8, 9, 10, oh gosh, man, I wish we could have them in our school shirt, because I went to Catholic grammar school.
Yeah.
So my neighbor next door was really excessive smoker, she was. And I would go to the store and give her name. and I get a couple packs for her. She put a couple packs in the whole day. And then she said to me, I only want 1 pack, but you get a tip. So I went in and said 2 packs, and they gave me 2.
Yeah.
So now I said, I got my white shirt. I'm going to put some Lucky Strikes in my pocket, and I'm going to go on Broadway with my tip money and buy a lighter instead of matches.
Right.
So it all evolved around. Now when I go over and sit over by the bleachers where the older guys were, and they say, hey, kid, you got Lucky Strikes in your pocket, just like they did. I said, yeah, you want one? And I gave them one. And so we befriended these guys by having that. And then some of the old neighbors with the Dago Red would put it in a bag with cups, and people were passing wine around. So if you think about our age group, having a little cigarette, having a little wine at that age, you got a little bit more mature.
That was my question is, how old were you specifically when you were doing this?
8 to 10.
8 to 10. Okay. Which is now the other, I guess we'd call them knuckleheads or kids you grew up with.
Right.
Did they act the same? Were they also mimicking the adults' behavior and, smoking the cigs and wanting to roll the dice and stuff?
Well, what it was back then, everybody in the row houses, including my house, there was ashtrays, there was a liquor case. Nobody had to go outside and smoke.
Right.
It was all inside.
All inside.
So all of us knew about cigarettes and things like that. And a lot of times in Italian families, they'll give some vino to the kids.
Of course.
If there's a birthday or if it's holiday, they would do that. And it's not that you're drinking hard liquor or beer or anything like that. So we wanted to become like them because they seem like they seem
cool.
happy, these guys. And so when I was able to put cigarettes in my pocket, and another kid told me, hey, if you find a pack of Lucky Strikes, you step on it if you're with your buddy and you punch him and say, Lucky Strike. And the kid would go, oh, man, why'd you hit me like that? Because I stepped on a Lucky Strike thing. That's what we do. And then everybody, whenever you see somebody step on one, you're going to get a shot if you're close enough. So
some hazing going on.
Yeah, it was fun time. Nobody really, we were all protected. It's like we played, we went behind like these sub shops. So the owners didn't want the kids hanging around there because it's messing with your business. So they would grip you up and shake you, that kind of stuff, and you get your shirt ruffled. Now you go back to the row house, and your father would say, what's wrong, man? Look at your shirt all wrinkled. What happened? Oh, nothing. No, what happened? I said, we were playing over by the deli. The guy was pushing us around along it, told us to get out of here.
Right.
The parent, they didn't settle for that. They would go around to the guy and want to square up with him for touching the little kids around. You know what I mean? So that's what would happen if some adult messed with us. It was just the parents would be right there for them. So we learned all that, but it wasn't a bad time for me. I kind of liked it,
You grew up in a time like, I can relate because I kind of grew up like that too. But now people are, behind computers and they're watching behind windows and they're looking at videos and observing people. Us and you were learning about it firsthand. It was cause and effect, right? A bunch of kids go behind the store owner. Place. He doesn't care. Like now people be like, oh, the police are going to get called and all this. Back then, adults just treated you like you were an adult almost. They just smack you around, beat you up. And then the adults seemed like they were all about it. They would get aggressive quickly. They didn't let anything slide. And now a lot of people let stuff slide. But back then, people called you out for what you did.
I believe they came back from World War II.
Yes.
Seeing a lot of combat.
Oh, yeah.
And then if our discipline didn't meet what they knew from the military, that's when they want to whack you around.
They were a different breed of people, and I don't think, from what I hear from what you say, I don't think any of it is wrong. I think your childhood was fine and great, and I think we lost a lot of that in America, especially just like having that rougher sort of childhood. It just makes you tougher earlier. It makes you more realistic about everything. You're not sitting around imagining what the world is like, how a lot of these kids are. You're experiencing the world.
We had it when we left the city and we went to the suburbs. There wasn't any of our peers from my neighborhood that if they would mess with you, you're 100% going to deal with them because you know the environment from growing up. They don't. They were in the suburbs. So you try to avoid it, but if you didn't, and a fine story was, the older guy told me, he said, if you get in a jam where somebody's bothering you, there's one thing you have to remember. He said you have to throw as hard as you can, and you're going to get hit, but make sure you fire back as hard as you can, and a lot of times you can win.
Yeah.
So that was our logic.
So if you get hit, make sure you hit back.
Make sure that you hit as hard as you can.
Yeah.
Not just trying to hit, but get in there and hit the body, hit the head, if you can. And then if they feel that hit, they're feeling a little pain. And when they feel the pain, as you're feeling the pain, maybe after a little bit, somebody busts it up pretty quick because they don't want it to go too far because you're in the neighborhood. So.
Yeah, that's another thing I think is lost now, especially in today's time with all this crime and everybody shooting each other, is that people forgot how to like get in a fist fight.
Exactly.
And kind of both guys kind of get the best of each other. And then I find usually afterwards people respect each other more. So that same person who was your, not enemy, but your rival, they can become your good friend. And
they do. A lot of times they did become that.
Yep.
And you learned a lot of friends whose fathers were hucksters that sold vegetables. And then your buddy would ask you want to go down to the terminal on Delaware Avenue? And he's going to pick produce up. Yeah, man, sure. I want to go. So we would go with him and he'd get all his vegetables and he pushed it around in the neighborhood. And we rode in his truck. So I thought that was cool.
That is cool.
That I could be down there where all these waterfront people with tomatoes and vegetables all loading up these, I guess they're like RVs now. And they had a scale on the back. And so we had some good times. The good times were just having fun and just in the wintertime was ice skating. In the summertime was swimming. So everything was there. But we came out of the city, which the city was nice, like you said, for Broadway. Broadway had all the greatest shops. Yeah. And then normally for Christmas and Easter, you get a new suit. So when your father would take you to the tailors, they measure you and they have the pattern. So when you come back, if you want another suit a different color, he would prep it for you and you have it for Easter and Christmas. So that was the big time.
Oh, I tell you something about Italian Americans. A lot of the world and the country loves the movies of the Italians because specifically the Italian Americans, I don't know, they just have a way about them, right? They're very East Coast. They're abrasive. They're brash, but they're funny. They dress well. They'll break your balls. Like they're having fun even when it's a miserable experience, you know?
Oh yeah. It's I remember running through the city, you know, people chasing you, and used to be like people had clotheslines. You know, okay. So they have like a wire one instead of rope. And if it's just the right, you know, height, and you're running through these backyards to get away from somebody, and it catches you right in the throat and knocks you around. And so when you get up and you go to school, guys like, yo, you got a ring on your neck, man. What happens? Am I hanging? I said, no. I ran into a clothesline in the dark, and I didn't see the line up there like that. So funny stuff like that.
It sounds like when you guys grew up, you didn't quite know exactly how the day would go, but you just go outside and all kinds of random.
And what you explained was we didn't have laptops, nothing, phones. When your mother would say, you got to be home at 5:30, it's dinner. She don't want you in the house if it's nice weather. You're going to go out with your friends. You're going to go visit them a couple blocks away. You're going to throw the ball around. Play touch football with these guys, and then you're like, oh, wow, it's 1:15, I gotta go. And so when everybody's sitting, table set, you better be there. Now, if you're not there, that's okay too, because you're not getting anything.
You're not going to get to eat.
The next day. No, you don't get nothing. Once it's put away and you're half an hour late, You don't even want to think. You asked your mother, do you have anything I can eat? That don't happen. So we had to be punctual. We had to be tough. But we also had to enjoy the city life. You don't forget that in row houses.
Sure.
You could hear somebody hollering at somebody across the street in the row house. That's how close you were. And it just who they were, And there's Italian people, when they get a little rage going on about them, they'll get smacking and slapping and everything, not with themselves,
There was a lot more, kids got beat back then, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was a thing. Now they don't beat them at least not in America as I see as much anymore. I'm sure in other places they do, but you got hands put on you if you got out of line.
100%.
Yeah.
The great thing about Camden was my father made a little dog house, and everybody in the family had their name on one of them little dogs, had a hook. Now, if you messed up and he hangs that in the dog house,
right?
Later that day he gonna come to you, straight you out on the issue. But it's a little bit, you're gonna get back.
The doghouse thing was basically you're in trouble. So
yeah, and you don't say anything, but later after he eats and all, he's gonna grip you up.
Wow. So you're sitting around knowing it's going to happen.
Yeah, 100%.
Waiting for it to happen.
100%. Yeah.
Wow.
And it did happen. So you try to avoid
getting in trouble.
I mean, he didn't care if he smelled smoke on us. He grew up in that city, so he didn't care about that. He cared about when he says, be here, you be here. If you're not, you're going to pay. So.
And when these adults would strike kids, are we talking backhanded slaps? Are we talking punches? Like what's
depends on your age group. Mine was where punches, stomachs, and stuff like that. Okay,
that hurt. That hurts bad.
As you grow into teen years, you're going to be hit like you're a big guy and you're not. So I remember that if you want to step out and see your friends, but you're supposed to be in by a certain time. So you go to bed and you're tucking in for school the next day. The villain's coming because he asked your mom, is he home? And she would say out of fear, no, he's with his friends. And he would jack you right out of bed at midnight. And you got to go to school for being there at 8 o'clock. So it was understandable. I mean,
Do you know if your other friends would get hit too? It wasn't just you. So it wasn't just your house. It was kind of the environment of
if
the
you
World
look
War
in history. Everybody, you spare the rod, you spoil the kid. That was their logic.
Yeah,
and it puts fear in you. You're just a little kid, and you don't want to be beaten. So you gotta, if they say be here or this, and don't throw to your shirt. You got to pay attention.
How old would you say you were before you got like a real shot from your father, like a stomach shot? Or we're not talking slaps here. We're talking getting punched in the stomach, which is
13 maybe.
You waited until you were 13. Okay.
Well, what happened was because of that, when you get about 16, you grow a little bit. And you mess with your peers in your neighborhood, you might throw hands. So he said it's time that we go in the yard and square off. Now, he was much stronger than me, for real.
Yeah.
But I knew that he wanted to see what I was made of.
Sure.
From what we went through. So we did a little round around, not real long.
Yep.
And he caught a couple good shots on me, but I caught one on him. And then he stopped.
So when you caught one, you mean you struck him?
Yeah.
Do you remember where you landed your punch?
Well, I normally, if you would like come in and step aside a little bit, and he's stepping, so you cut him on the side of the head. But it was a shot. I got him with a shot. And he expected that. He's not going back here with me looking he's going to knock me right down. That don't happen.
Sure.
So he grew respect. After that day, there was no more of that going on.
Wow.
It stopped.
It's got to be a hell of a day when, you have a son, and I'm sure your father loved you, right? And I'm sure love was way different back then, and people were way different. But it's got to be a heck of a thing when one day, you're disciplining your son, and you see him growing, and and then you're like, let's have at it, and he's younger, you were younger, so
the truth of it all is, the words that came out of his mouth was, I can't control you.
Yes.
And he didn't have control when I got that age. There
Yep.
was no control because
Right.
I wanted to be out with my friends like they are.
Yep.
I wanted to have a cigarette with them. I wanted to hang with them in the deli. You don't put me in the house and keep me there because you want to and you're not even home. And that's when it changed.
It's like something out of the movie The Bronx Tale, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
how can you control a young man, right?
You
Because he's aging and you're aging, but you're getting more mature and stronger, faster.
Exactly.
He probably wasn't slow or weak, but you're still obviously half his age and you're up and coming, you know. So
Right.
eventually you're just
We're
like,
the ones that's coming out of the ash and becoming one. And
Yep.
so a great story was he drove by with my sister and I was banging around the parking lot behind a pizza shop with somebody. And she said, "Oh, look, he's fighting over there." And he said to her, which he remembers till today, "Oh, he can take care of himself."
from my perspective, it seems that he, you know, that was his form of discipline, and his love language was to help you be a man. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't right all the time. I'm sure nobody is, but like in his mind, it was probably important for him to know that you could handle yourself.
Yeah.
So, Big Lou, when you go back to Camden now and you see this city that your father grew up in, your grandfather came from Italy, you know, you guys had a lot of history in Camden. How do you feel when you go there now and you see was?
Well, here's what happened. I had jury duty.
Okay.
Maybe, let's take it back, maybe 10 years ago, because I don't have it anymore because I'm older. And I went by the school and I wanted to see where the playground, you know, we played in the yard and stuff. And across the street was a pizza shop.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's predominantly Hispanic and, you know, the other folks.
Yeah.
So I'm standing there. I went and got a slice, and 3 guys are standing in the corner. And they asked me, "What are you doing here?" But I have jury duty, but it's on lunch. I said, "Well, it is right across the street. That school right there is where I went. And this is where I grew up with before I went as a teenager later. So I feel that I can have a slice and look at my school."
So they questioned you.
And they walked away when I told them I was a part of Camden. I was a part of that neighborhood.
Was it a hostile question? Was it just a, hey, what's up kind of question? How was it directed?
Was why was an older guy like me that's not known because they know who's in that neighborhood. What am I doing getting a slice on 4th Street, close to the school? And they wanted to know what I was doing there. Who am I? Am I the man? Was I some sort of undercover cop? And they were edgy about it until I told them who I was. And then they just went back to their corner and enjoyed my pizza. And I went back to City Hall. And that's what I knew. But when I look at the neighborhood, our row houses, we might have had 12 row houses on our street. I took a picture where there's only 3 left out of that many. All the rest is gone. It's across the street, same way. It just got demolished because steps were being used for firewood. None of that. So in a matter of 20 years, you don't want to go there at night. So if they don't know you, then you got to stay away.
Yep. So it sounds like, you know, the kids were in the street before up to kind of not, you know, and they kind of not up to no good, but it got worse. Now they're really, really up to no good. And
yeah, you can't. It's so trashed on Broadway with trash that I don't know how many days they pick it up, but they don't pick it up that often. And even the side alleyways is just filthy with stuff and busted down cars. That's what it looks like around here.
So basically destroyed. Looks like a war happened, and then I know Camden's gotten better since then. Like in the past 10 years, they say it's gotten better. I know in the 90s it was horrible.
Reason for that is a lot of the buildings like RCA, Van Sciver Furniture, Camel Soup, they convert it into condos.
Yeah.
And in that area down where they have like rock concert, as you know, down there. And especially with Cooper Hospital, there's nurses now. They tore the old houses down and started building nice condos for people who live that work for the hospitals. So that's what changed it. Those people can survive because they have in the building parking, so they're not leaving the car on Broadway, and they're coexisting, and they're redeveloping now. Each time they're taking sections of neighborhoods and tearing them down, and then they're redoing the roads and everything so people can work in Camden at a business level, hospital level, things like that. So it is going to regroup, but it might take another 20 years. Maybe.
Well, shortly after you left, Camden became the murder capital of the United States of America. And I'm sure most people noticed, but America is a really big country. It's very large. And to have a fairly small city, I don't think Camden's that big.
No.
It's fairly big. To be number one consistently with homicides, murder for, a long time. So that tells you it was beating out Baltimore, Los Angeles, which is, after you left, it really became a violent and place where people were getting murdered on the streets. The same streets you were in and hanging out in, people were dying in those streets not too long after you left it.
No. What happened was the abandoned houses and these row houses where there was no more windows, so they would move in there and live in these places and then do their business out on the street. And so they didn't have to pay rent. It just was empty buildings.
Squatters, basically, just squatting.
Yeah, they moved in, but you're not going to go in there by yourself or with anybody because they defend where they're living. And then they would come out and do things. Now, if you made a mistake, then you're one of the ones that die. So that's still going on. From what I see.
People are getting killed over there for stupid reasons.
Exactly.
For bumping into somebody disrespecting you, somebody giving you a side eye, somebody saying something you don't like. As when back in your guys' day, the same thing happened, but you settled it with fist fighting, which is the correct way to do it, not just shoot people. And then the ages got younger, 13-year-olds with guns out there. And
exactly.
I think it's almost cowardly in a way. It's more violent, obviously, and the threat is more real. But I think people should be able to square off and have a disagreement. And like you said earlier, your enemy can become your friend if you just work through it, punch each other a couple times, and then you might find out you have a lot more in common. I don't know if you know this, but Camden has more surveillance than any other city in the entire United States of America. They have more cameras. They have these things to triangulate sound, so they can literally, meaning the police force, the local, a city or whatever, they can hear and see almost everything that is done on the streets of Camden. They use that as a base for Chicago. I know they have, I don't know about now, but that infrastructure they had for the cameras and the policing was used to help Chicago and Seattle and Philly and other places. So wild place,